CBS came out with a new poll that did not go well for Joe Biden. Let's go to Face the Nation, because in our pivot here to the weakest candidate ever, let's just start out with some numbers. So why are we able to even call him the weakest candidate ever? Let's go over some of the latest polling numbers by CBS, and that's why it's on Face the Nation. Let's start with this polling data, latest polling data from CBS.
Important week in the 2024 election, in which both President Biden and former President Trump are expected to win hundreds of delegates in Super Tuesday contests in more than 15 states. On Thursday, Mr. Biden will make his State of the Union address. Our CBS News poll out this morning shows the former president with a 4-point edge over the current president among likely voters nationwide. That is Trump's largest general election lead yet in our surveys this cycle. Joining us now is our Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto. Anthony, good to have you here.
Good morning.
So our polling has shown perceptions of the economy have been improving. So why isn't that helping Joe Biden?
Because it's the comparison that people are making between how they rate the economy today.
Now, listen to this, and you can hear the arrogance in the host voice, but listen to this trying to dispel people's reaction, people's feelings, what people think about the economy. Listen to this part here, because of the assessment by people giving Donald Trump more credit. Listen to how they talk about people's memory.
And what they remember it being during the Trump years.
Let me go back 15 seconds and let it play here.
Perceptions of the economy have been improving. So why isn't that helping Joe Biden?
Because it's the comparison that people are making between how they rate the economy today and what they remember it being during the Trump years. And it's the remembering is the key word there. I specifically asked, how do you remember it? And 2/3 of voters say they remember it being good, which is also interesting because if you go back and look at the polling from that time, people did in fact rate it good in 2018, 2019, but then views of the economy cratered after the pandemic and the shutdowns. And it doesn't seem like they're remembering that part of it here, but that's the reality today. So it's that comparison that isn't holding up for the White House, number one. And then number two, you push that forward and ask, well, whose policies might make prices go down? And there's a lot of Republicans who think that prices will go down if Donald Trump gets elected. But what's troubling for Joe Biden is that you still get him associated with price increases, because a lot of people think that prices will continue to go up under his policies. That's why.
Memory is an interesting thing, isn't it?
Memory is an interesting thing, even though he just said the polls at that time reflected. So it's not just memory. Contemporaneously, you have evidence of polls that he looked back on to say, yes, they were reflecting on the economy at the time being better during Trump. And then what does he say? Just think about it. This is the gaslighting they're trying to get you to say, oh, your memory is faulty. Really? Because what does he say? Why would they think back and say a Donald Trump presidency, now think about his 4 years, was overall better economically? They're going to give him a better rating. Is that faulty memory? Now listen to what he said, because he says we went back and looked at polling and they gave him a good rating in 18, 19. Then he says, then something happened to the economy, the pandemic. You mean towards the end of his freaking presidency? Because remember, he's in the office in 17, 18, 19, or actually 16, 17, 18, 19. So all those years, it's been good or at least steady. And then the final year, 19, the end of 19 and 20, pandemic hit and the economics goes down. They're supposed to judge his presidency off the smaller time frame. Gotcha. These people are just intellectually dishonest, and they say things without you. And if you don't critically think, you just go, "Oh, yeah, that's crazy."
Anthony, the campaign is leaning heavily into issues of democracy, access to voting, even calling Donald Trump a threat to democracy itself. Why isn't that helping the Biden campaign?
Well, that's in the electorate's mind, but it's kind of priced in at this point in this sense. You get a majority of Americans that do think that the former president tried to stay in office past his constitutional term. The ones who think that his approach to that was illegal, which is just under half, are in fact voting for Joe Biden. But everybody else, the ones who think he was following constitutional processes or wasn't planning to stay, they're all ready to return Donald Trump to office. So that split in many ways kind of defines not just the race, but also where we are as a country right now. Maybe it moves a little bit as the trials go forward. Maybe if there's a conviction, certainly something to watch. But net, you get about an even split between Biden and Trump right now on who would do best at keeping democracy safe.
Democrats are.
So the thing they have been propagandizing for years, the thing of ending democracy of Trump, look at the polling on that. They've been pushing this propaganda so hard just to be winning by 1 point. In this poll, 34% say Biden wins on keeping democracy. 33% says Trump. That's their report card on this. This has to be devastating news for the establishment on this particular point about democracy, because they've been pushing this. They got January 6th. They got all these trials that's going on just for them to be 1 point up, and that's within the margin of error. Devastating.
Are putting reproductive rights front and center in this campaign, betting that it will drive turnout among voters across party lines who are just concerned about this issue. Is that a safe bet?
So there is a majority that feels that the overturn of Roe v. Wade was bad for the country. But what's interesting to me is this difference between then who blames Donald Trump for that, which is what the Biden campaign is trying to do. And that's a smaller number.
So this is another devastating poll number. Let me see if I can get it to. Here we go. This is another devastating poll number. Trump and Roe v. Wade overturned. Do you give him credit, blame, or neither? Do you give him blame for this? 33%. You mean all of this hand wringing you've said about Donald Trump and how he appointed the justices that overturned Roe v. Wade, and all that's showing up in the polls is 33%. The plurality being 48% saying neither credit or blame. That's a problem. If one of your selling points for Joe Biden is abortion rights, that's a problem if that's to be that low. But let's listen.
But then coming even more immediately, the recent IVF ruling, we asked about that. And in fact, a large majority thinks that IVF should be legal. So again, this issue is going to stay top of mind and certainly is going to be a factor, I think.
And it's interesting because in Alabama, where that ruling happened 2 weeks ago, they are working very swiftly to protect it within the state legislature, and the governor are expected to look at some of those bills this week. So it shows how resonant that one issue is. But Anthony, this is going to be such a key week. We have Super Tuesday upon us. Has Biden been able to consolidate the base of his party, the people who are committed to coming out as Democrats?
Well, in many ways, no, not yet. And that's really important for two things. One is that a lot of the measures I've been describing here for Joe Biden are driven in part by the fact that Democrats are more critical of him and more critical of their president than Republicans are of Donald Trump. Now,
Is that always the case?
well, in some ways, that's kind of typical for Democrats, right? It's often a more transactional approach, often a little more criticism in there, whereas Republicans, and they've told us, they really value loyalty to Donald Trump. So some of that is baked in. But having said that, it comes out in the political story in right now, Democrats being less likely to say that they'll definitely vote. And a lot of Joe
It's a
Biden's
10-point
numbers are in
gap.
part lower because of that. His
That's an
campaign has work to do
enthusiasm number
to drive
here.
up that motivation. And he's not doing as well as he did in 2020 with some key Democratic groups. I would add this, though, Margaret, and I think it's important. Joe Biden is trailing Donald Trump when we ask, who has a vision for the country?
Wow.
And that speaks across party lines in
Wow.
many ways. And what I think is important there
Trump is
is
beating
that
them in
these
every
are
category
uncertain
here.
times in the minds of many voters. When people see uncertainty, even if they don't rate things right now as good, and they don't, they want a roadmap. They want to know where things are going. And that's a key gap that I'm going to watch over the next few months.